Welcome to Future Role Model, a podcast that praises the unconventional and redefines what it means to be a role model. I'm your host, Natasha Pearl Hansen, and we got Chris Porter in the house today.
Hello, hello.
I'm very raspy sounding today. I kind of like it.
It's nice. You got that smoky rasp.
It was a lot. That's what happens when you get back from Vegas, which you also did too. We just weren't there at the same time quite.
Yes.
But whenever I get back from Vegas, I feel like I'm just full of water bloat and I have no voice.
Oh, well, then you and I do Vegas differently. I usually come home super dehydrated, also with the raspy voice, though.
Yeah. Well, the dehydrated thing is usually what happens to me while I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
I always feel really light and like good when I'm in Vegas, which is probably a result of not drinking any water and just sweating and drinking liquor.
Yes.
And the second I get home, I'm like, oh, I need to drink 10 gallons of Pedialyte, and then I do, and then it just like stays in me for 4 days.
Yeah. No, I get drunk and then I get home and I just pray for the best. There's always like 2 days of sadness. Not even like I'm sad I miss Vegas. It's just like that come down from like having a really great time for 48 hours straight.
Yep, and ultra stimulation. I feel like that's just what Vegas is just very stimulating as a place.
Yes, and also it's like you feel like when you go with friends, you're like in a little gang.
Yeah.
And you're taking on the world.
Yeah.
And it's pretty great. And it is all very stimulating. The food's amazing. And you feel on top of the world when you're there. And then you come back and you're like, oh, that's right. There's real life.
Yep. There's like lights and sounds and germs and a lot of oxygen everywhere. And it's just, you're like, what's happening? But I'm going to be in Vegas a lot more now. I'm starting like a weekly thing out there. I won't have to physically be there every week.
Oh, yeah, like a comedy thing?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that'll be
but
awesome.
I'm gonna go monthly.
Oh, great.
Which might burn me out. But not if you go for like 36 hours. I feel like 36 hours to 48 hours is like the perfect amount of Vegas time, depending on.
Yeah, I like to go in Thursday and leave Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, that's perfect.
That's the best.
Yeah.
Especially if you drive.
Oh, yeah.
It's wide open Saturday night.
Oh, nice. I didn't even think about that.
You can make it back in like 3.5 hours.
You just went on a private jet, though.
Yeah, that was way better.
Was that your first time on a private?
No, it was my second time. It was funny because the first time was actually on the way back from Vegas. So now I got to see it the other way. And
did it feel it looked different?
It felt totally different. No, that lifestyle's great. I mean, you pull up to the plane.
Yeah.
And then you fly. And then I realized when we got to the hotel, I still had the beer from the plane. I'm like, this is the greatest life of all time.
Yeah.
Because we literally just walked off the plane and there was a limo and a Rolls Royce waiting to pick us up. And I was like, yeah, this is the way to do it.
You can get used to that stuff.
For sure. For sure.
I didn't fly private this time, but I flew in one of those semi-privates where it's called Jet Suite X.
Oh, yeah, that's how I flew back. It is the best.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Well, and it's just nice. It is just nice to show up and sit in a room and then get on a plane and not have to deal with the TSA stuff.
Oh, yeah. Like when you show up 30 minutes before a flight and you sit there for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
That's an amazing boarding process.
Exactly. I got some work done. Felt very productive before landing back in LA.
And also it's a lot of like regular travelers. It's not, you fly commercial, especially during the summer. It's a bunch of noobs.
Yeah.
That have no idea what the fuck they're doing.
Well, in that city especially, because I mean, you fly a lot too. I fly a lot, and there's so many people. I forget how many people just don't know how to travel.
Yeah.
And it's why people watching in an airport is just so obnoxious and entertaining and sad at the same time. It's like
it's just like because to them it's still this grandiose thing that's
right.
hard to get a grasp on. They're like, I don't know, everyone's moving so fast.
I know.
It's like just go to your gate and sit the fuck down. What are you looking for?
Everybody's always looking for something.
This is no longer romantic. This place turned into a crowded bus station in 2002.
Exactly. Well, it has become a bus. I mean, because, when you think about, we were having this discussion the other day, but flying and movie theater experiences used to be things that people dressed up to do.
Yeah.
And now it's just like, I'm going to go in my pajamas and...
yeah, you're like, why are you wearing that? I'm comfortable.
Yeah, I fly. I always look like shit when I fly, but I am the most comfortable.
Yeah. Also, who are you going to meet on a plane at 6 a.m?
Yeah.
I'm not talkative.
Nope.
I could meet the girl of my dreams on a plane at 6 o'clock in the morning. I'd go, well, Missed that opportunity. I'm not talking to this chick right now.
Have you ever been on a flight and had one of those annoying conversations that won't stop with somebody? Or are you pretty good at avoiding it now?
I'm really good at avoiding those mainly because I have an eye mask and earplugs, and I'm the guy, you could be mid-sentence and I'm like rolling up the earplugs and like shoving them in my ear going, oh yeah? No, that's great.
Yep.
No, I'm super interested. Eye mask on.
Well, and that's what's confusing when you're a very outgoing person, because I am, but it needs to be on my terms.
Absolutely.
And I had to learn how to shut off that switch for myself when I'm flying, just so I don't die.
My pet peeve is when the people behind you are talking the whole flight and loudly because they don't pop their ears so they can't hear themselves.
Yep.
So it's just this 2-hour conversation that's going nowhere.
Yep.
And it's just a caffeinated tangent. And you just want to turn around like, listen, I know I sound like a dick, but y'all need to shut the fuck up because you're stupid. Like, none of this is going
And you're
anywhere.
also like, if I transcribe the conversation you were having, you're accomplishing 0 things.
Yeah,
So-
and if you read it, you would be like, yeah, we do need to shut up.
Yep. Yeah. And it'd be worth it if they were actually like solving world hunger or something like that. But
They never are. They're
Nobody's
just talking about the time they both went to Dayton. You know, it's like, man, that is not momentous at all.
oh my gosh. And I love the fact that you have that Midwest sense of humor too, which is because you grew up in Kansas City. Which
did.
You're rocking the shirt right now.
Yeah, most of my things say Kansas City in some form or another.
Make it pretty obvious.
Yeah, I don't. It's just kind of my thing now. Like everyone moves to LA and they buy the Dodgers hat and they pretend like they've lived here their whole lives.
I know. I never understood that.
And I'm just like, man, I'm going to go the opposite way and be like, I love Los Angeles. I love living here, but I'm not fucking from here.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
Yeah. So,
I've
I'm proud about that too.
I've never acquired any LA gear. I was born in Wisconsin and raised in Wisconsin, so I'm a Packer fan.
Yeah.
But when I moved to Chicago, I hadn't acquired like other teams yet. So in my early 20s, I became a Blackhawks and a Cubs fan.
For sure.
And then nowhere else I will move in life, I will acquire a new team.
I bought a Dodger hat and a Dodger shirt because I go to Dodger games.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to fit in.
Yeah.
But I don't wear them outside of Chavez Ravine
Yeah, exactly.
at all.
You just keep them in a bag.
As a matter of fact, my sister borrows that hat more than I wear it.
Yeah.
So
How long have you lived here now from Kansas City?
14 years next month, since 2005.
Fuck. It
Yeah.
flies, doesn't it?
I moved out here the weekend Katrina hit because it had already hit the refineries and gas prices had skyrocketed. And I remember filling up in Arizona going, way to go, Porter. You literally picked the worst weekend in
drive?
history to drive across the country.
Oh shit! And how did you do it? Did you just pack up your car and drive your
well,
life?
I had like I had a buddy that lived out here, and he was like, "You can stay out here for 2 months before I'm going to charge you rent." And so I stayed out there and used those 2 months to. I mean, I was still doing the road, so I would do the road, come back, and then go look for places.
Yeah.
And then moved to Hollywood and haven't really left.
You moved straight from Kansas City?
Straight from Kansas City, yeah. Because when I came up, I think it's still this way. Like after you kind of outgrew your Midwest home, you had to go to New York or Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And just being a kid from the rural suburbs of Kansas, like we did a lot of shit outside. And I was just like, worst case scenario, if I'm going to be poor and struggling,
It needs to be sunny.
It needs to be nice out.
Yeah.
Or at least have somewhere I can go and just chill and it's free.
Exactly. Well, and that was my thought too when I was thinking LA versus New York, because I started in Chicago. Granted, I hadn't done everything possible in Chicago yet, but I knew I'd have to start over coming to LA anyway.
sure.
So I was just like, I'm just gonna rip the Band-Aid off and do it. But I was lucky enough to have a friend who was also in the same comedy, like he had been in a comedy for like a year and a half, 2 years at that point with me, and he was a flight attendant. So I jump seated between LA and New York for a number of months to get to like decide. But that was the big thing for me too, because Chicago gets so fucking cold, and I was like, I just can't do this in another cold place.
And I made sure to go to New York like in January.
Yeah.
I was like, I want to see it when it's the worst.
Worst.
And I went there and I was like, this is a lot of fun. It's also super expensive.
Yeah.
Like I just felt as soon as you left your hotel room, it cost you $100.
Yeah. I've always said the exact same thing. You
Yeah.
go outside and it's $100.
For sure. And in LA, I mean, you can spend well more than that out, but like you can also get away with just going to the beach or just going to Griffith Park
Yep.
and just hanging out or going to some cemetery and watching a movie.
Walking around.
Yeah, and in New York, it's like, how did I lose $38?
Yeah,
And you're like,
right.
oh, that's right, I had a sandwich.
And that was $100 in itself. But yeah, when I first moved here, I'd go on hikes and I would just call it urban hiking. And my grandma would be like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "The only thing I can do, I don't have a car yet.
Yeah.
So I'm using my legs."
And I can't afford a gym, so this
Yep.
is kind of a double-edged sword
Exactly. Everything was a walk. Everything was a long fucking walk. So starting out in Kansas City, is that where you started comedy? Or
Yeah.
okay, you did.
here. When I was 19,
What was the scene like in Kansas City then?
it was still like, it was still super underground comedy was. Like, it was definitely in a huge lull.
Yeah.
You know, people weren't really showing up to clubs unless it was a huge name, and but it was kind of fun because we had it, like, especially in Kansas City when I started, we had this really good group of comics that had been doing it, and then comics that were coming up, and a dude named Emery was running the open mic night and was very good about helping fertilize the talent and making sure they had room to grow. And you know, it was also like a thing, we would show up, all of us, 2 hours before the open mic and run our sets to each other and help each other, like, go through them.
That's
and,
cool.
And punch them up, or you don't need to say that or whatever. And then afterwards, we would have a big group together. We'd all meet downstairs, and one of the professional local comics would give notes to the amateurs, and you could take them for what they were.
That's awesome.
And so it was like this great scene. And, you know, I'm glad to be a part of it. It was also at a club that was in the middle of a bar district. So it was kind of magical. Like, you'd have a Friday night show where 90 walk-ups would show up.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And just out of the blue, you'd have a sold-out show for some no-name. And
if that was only a thing anymore, man.
no shit.
Now it's like post, text.
Oh, yeah. And I remember there was no sending a booker a link. Like, you would either have to send them you'd have to go record yourself, find somebody that had some way to duplicate VHS.
Yep.
And then mail it. And then hound the booker for 2 months asking them to watch your tape finally.
Yeah.
And or the other option was, if it was regional, you and your comic friends, like 4 of you, would go to that club's open mic night,
Yeah.
and one of you would have to stay sober enough to drive you back.
Which is hard.
Which is so, and sober enough was not the legal definition of that, by the way.
Yeah.
It was just one of us going, yeah, I'll chance it. And so, yeah, I remember driving to Omaha and driving to Des Moines and St. Louis with like 4 comics. And it's, you know, it was a lot of fun. Those were some of the most fun times of my career, I feel. Like, I definitely look back on those times and, like, that was when it wasn't a business, when it was just like this dream and you're like, we're doing it.
Yeah, there's something freeing about being in that space where you're like unsure that it's your set future.
Yeah, and
Where-
you're just so hungry.
Yeah, and you're just there's like an amount of playfulness too that you can have. I remember that just even starting in Chicago being like having so much fun on stage because there were no stakes.
Yeah. And also you had no idea what you were doing. So that
Yeah.
that ignorance allowed you to have fun in a space that, like, today you wouldn't have fun because, you know, you're better at reading your room or you're more coherent on stage. So you're, you know, you don't even enjoy the moments because you're too busy thinking about what's next and all that stuff. But when you're young as a comic, you're like, you tell a joke and it works. You're like, yes, like you almost do like a victory lap after every good joke. And now we're at a point in our careers where you're like, no, that joke should kill. And now I got to move it. Now, should this joke kill?
No, and then you overthink it, like, oh, I got to make it better. And yeah, I mean, it's just becomes so interesting. What year did you start stand up?
1998.
Okay.
Yeah.
God, so 21 years.
21 years
Oh,
in June.
Fuck.
Yeah, it was 21 years.
I'm hitting my 10 almost, and I'm like still like that's a fucking long time.
Yeah. Well, it's like it's I'm at the point now, like, every time I say it, it makes me feel a little sad.
No, no, it should. I mean, you've accomplished so much, but we'll get to all that later. But I mean, it's crazy too. I mean, I remember being 4 years in and thinking, oh, well, I feel like I'm going to do something probably in the next year or two. And then a year or 2 or 3 goes by and you're like, I'll eventually just do something cool.
Yeah. My favorite is when young comics that are like 3 or 4 years in, like, come up to me and like, I did it. I found my voice. I'm
You're like,
no.
yep.
First off, I've been doing it 21 years and I'm not sure I found my voice yet. Like,
Well, because we constantly are changing as people.
absolutely. And
So-
if you're not, then you're not growing.
Yeah. So I mean, even I remember at about year 4 or 5 hating everything that I did.
Yeah.
And thinking I needed to start fresh and was like, how am I going to work for a while? Because I wanted nothing to do with the set I already had.
For sure. Because you get to a point where you're like, you know, and it's like anything. You write a joke that's maybe better than any joke you've ever written, and it's like you cross an echelon, and you're like, oh, I need to write all my jokes like this one, and you know, and now like especially, you know, my voice is what it is. Like I'm sure I've never actually tried to define it in any way,
Yeah.
or even really think about it, but now it's just like I just try to find the tone of a record. Like I'll write a bit and be like, oh, that would be the good tone of the next album.
Yeah, and that's direction I need to
And
write
then
in.
and then that's how that starts. But I'm
Mhm.
never like, but that always happens organically. Like I'm never like going into an album like, oh, I'm going to talk about this and then
Yeah.
it's going to go here. No, it's just like I'll write some bit and I'm like, oh, okay, and that's a good through line for an entire set. So,
Yeah.
you know, like Ugly and Angry was definitely like that, and then especially A Man from Kansas was like I had a bit in there where I was like, oh, that's the tone of the entire set.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and like just even stuff talking about it's just all just very your comedy resonates with me a lot because I'm a Midwest person too, and I feel like whenever I hear somebody else from the Midwest talk about their crazy family or fucked up things that they've done, it just makes me feel at home,
yeah,
and I love that.
well, and just from being from the Midwest, you're just a little more. Again, for the most part, people are a little more even keeled,
Yeah.
and it's like they're not on the fringes of politics or social thinking.
Yeah.
So it's just like you definitely recognize that where you're like, oh yeah, this person will think about something before they start spouting off about it.
Well, it seems to be more story based. It's not in general, but like most of the comics I'm close to from Chicago, most of my friends started in Minneapolis, tend towards stories a little bit more
Yeah.
because we didn't have the stimulation of trains and excitement like that. Pop culture wasn't really a thing that I paid attention to growing up.
For sure. And also like that's what we did in the Midwest is we sat around and got drunk and told stories.
Yeah, 100%.
Especially like parties and like I remember in high school the way I kind of started going towards comedy was like me and my buddy John would sit at a thing and just start talking about shit that had happened, and next thing you know there's 10 people at our table just listening to us shoot the shit.
Yeah.
And that's when you're like, oh, we're funnier than most.
And we're good storytellers.
And we're good storytellers.
Being a captivating storyteller is something a lot of people take for granted because even when you forget how many people are really shitty at telling even the most basic story.
Yeah.
I
So many words.
Oh, so many words. And
So many unnecessary details.
yes, exactly. I was in the Caribbean doing my show and I decided to add a live podcast onto it, which the reason I like podcasting with other comics so much is we are capable of being concise. There's other entertainers that can do that as well. I would eventually like to do some athletes on here and stuff, but I've been spoiled because I forgot how much normal people can't describe life in the same way. And I went to the Caribbean and I opened up only like 5 to 7 minute segments of the live podcast for strangers to come on and tell like an interesting story, just to cut down little Instagram clips. And it was so fucking challenging.
Yeah.
It was actually the most hard thing I've ever done.
Because people, especially if you don't speak publicly, you think you need to add in you think
All
you're
the
being
details.
creative and artistic, and you're like, no, you're just filling me with shit I don't need to know to get to the end of the
Yeah,
story.
and these are some of the most entertaining people. Like, you know, the island kind of voted on who is the most funny that they thought,
Oh,
and
okay.
like, you know, and
Yeah.
picked out people that should share like a funny story, you know, a drinking story, an interesting story.
Yeah, but people are always like, okay, before we get into the story, I need to tell you about Gary. Gary's
Yep.
wife, kind of a snatch. I don't really like her. But anyway, you're like, but you know what? She wasn't even there. And then you're like, well, then why do we even talk about
Yeah,
that?
why'd you bring her up?
Yeah.
I don't need to. You ever go back home to the Midwest and have somebody like tell you a story and they refer to all their coworkers and list all their names, and you're like, I
No.
don't need to know about George.
I don't even need to go home. My sister calls me from her job here in LA, and she was like, well, this person and this person. I'm like, listen, I know you're calling me to vent, and I know you're calling me just because you need to get this shit off your chest, but I don't need names.
Yep.
And you don't need to explain, because I'm never going to meet this person. And if I do, it's going to be for 4 fucking minutes.
Just tell me how you're affected
Yeah.
and what do you need from me right now.
Just get to the end of this goddamn story, please.
So growing up, was it just you and your sister, or do you have other siblings?
Yeah. And there was 7.5 years difference between us.
Whoa.
So I had a good run where I was solo.
Yeah.
And then she came around.
How did that feel when she came around?
I mean, it was fine. I mean, I was 7, so I didn't really know how to deal with it. I mean,
Yeah.
it was happening.
Yeah.
She was like a pet for a long time. You know what I'm saying? Just like something
Totally.
I had
You're
to
like,
mind
what
and
is
take
that?
care of and make sure it didn't kill itself. And
Yep.
but didn't, and had a nice personality, but I didn't, you know. And then as she got older, we didn't really, because I moved out at 18, and she would have been 11 at that point,
Yep.
so still not a person.
Yeah.
And so then it wasn't until she was like 15 or 16 I was home. I think I might have moved home or something, but it was like she was pulling some bullshit, and I just kind of went into her room, and I'm like, I know what you're fucking doing.
I've been there.
And I was like, they may not be able to see you coming, but I see you coming a mile away, because I did all this shit. And like just the look on her face was like, oh, okay. So maybe you are kind of on my side a little bit. And that just started the bonding process. And now she's, one of my best friends. We do a podcast together now.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we just started it. It's called the 1 Millionth Podcast, because
there are a million.
there are a million, and we're super late to the game. And so, but yeah, and we hang out. She lives a block and a half from me, and it's cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, but I think the age difference helped us in the long run, just because we never went to the same school. We didn't even go to the same school system.
You didn't have like the opportunity to hit on her friends or her hit on your friends.
Not until later. And
Right.
then by that time, I was like, yeah, if you want to fuck any of my weird-ass friends, by all means. Just I don't want to hear the details.
Yeah. I have a lot of friends that were maybe not just a 7-year age gap in general between two siblings, but I have a lot of friends that have large families. So they have like the oldest to youngest has age gaps like that.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the case with most people, is that it just takes time and age to start becoming friends and growing in that relationship.
And I think that's like anything. You just have to mature. It's like, I
Yeah.
don't really want to hang out with comics that haven't been doing it very long.
Yeah.
Just because they want to get all deep about comedy theory. And I'm like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I become more, overthinking things becomes more laughable as I get older. Like, I don't remember who did this recently, but there was somebody did a fake experiment in a museum where they put up all this art that was done by like a 2-year-old.
Okay.
I don't know if you heard about this. And they had all these people, these art, collector people come in, and everyone was talking all this deep stuff about they came out at the end and they were like, you fucking idiots. This was all done by a child. Like,
Yeah, this shit wasn't deep at all.
yeah, it meant nothing.
This
And
is
so,
literal poop right here.
But
He
people
had an
try to
accident.
search for like meaning in so many things where you're like, this is just, I don't know. It's just words, man. I mean, it means more than that, but it's
Just people think they're so smart and so deep, and you're like, no, man. It's like when Sacha Baron Cohen did his last thing, This Is America or whatever,
Yeah.
and he told that lady that like, oh, this was made from my blood and my pubic hair. I'm an ex-con, and
oh god, I didn't see that one.
and she's just like, oh, it's just you can just see the pain in it. And you're just like, you're a fucking
Oh my god, I
lunatic.
did not see that one.
Yeah.
That show, I watched a couple episodes of that show and I was dying. But it just goes to show you so many people are just full of shit. Even in Aziz's new special, he asked some guy about something that happened in the news, and the guy was like, "Yeah, I remember that." And he's like, "I just fucking made that up.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
what's wrong with everybody?" But
Oh,
it's so funny.
That's
just,
everybody.
It's
these
everybody.
days.
Yeah.
They're like, I watch the news for 5 minutes. I'm super smart,
Yep.
and I feel like a lot of it just comes from people that were dumb in school, like they just didn't get it, and so now they feel like they've completed a thought after they watch the news. That
Yeah.
They're like, oh no, I have the answers.
Exactly.
And it's like, no, you don't. The
No.
Earth is not flat.
Although my friend and I'm notorious for crashing things. My friend
Okay.
and I did decide we want to go crash the next Flat Earthers convention, which I think is here in LA or Southern California.
Get ready to
End of the
smell
year.
a lot of cat pee,
Yeah.
because that's what these people own.
Smells like a Magic the
dungeons.
Gathering tournament.
Oh, for sure. Like, I make fun of flat earthers on my new special, and I had a guy like, love your comedy, but you need to do your research. And I'm like, there are just so many things fundamentally wrong with the flat earth theories.
Yeah.
Like, literally, the earth wouldn't function the way it does if you were correct.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, it's just, I've never been a big theory person. Like, I'm just kind of, the more I age, the more open-minded I get to things in general.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's a good point. Okay, that's a good point. But I'm not going to change the way I think because of those points people make.
Oh, and I talk about in my act now, like, I'll just concede the point just to not argue with you.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean you swayed me in any way. It
Yeah.
just means I don't want to fucking talk about it.
Exactly.
And I just want to move on. I'm like, yeah, okay, great.
Yep, exactly. And then when you were growing up, did you have a feeling young that you were going to end up getting into comedy, or was there?
No.
What was young Chris like?
Young Chris was very straight edge, very introverted, was afraid of girls for the most part, but liked them very much. Was still way into music, which made me weird because I wasn't into the new stuff. I was into like Motown and soul. And
Oh,
like,
shit.
Yeah, like my dad. I have to do this thing coming up next month, so I've had to do a lot of recollection of my young music days, and it was just like when I was supposed to be babysitting my sister, my parents had left me this record collection to like. They just had borrowed it from a friend of theirs to make mixtapes for their 20-year reunion.
Mm-hmm.
But while I was supposed to be watching my sister, I would just play these records, and so like I would just make mixtapes and come to school with like Otis Redding and Jackie Wilson and all these, and like girls are like, my dad listens to this shit. I'm like, isn't it great? And they're like, no, play New Kids on the Block. I'm like, that shit's garbage. Like, even as a kid, I was a 40-year-old man.
Yeah, no, it's cool that you knew that.
It is now. It wasn't then.
It wasn't then. No, absolutely not. How did you make a mixtape off a record back then? Did you just have the actual tape recorder that you hit record next to it?
My dad had bought a cassette deck that was made to like record and like had input levels, and even as a kid, like I could work a stereo, so I could just record straight from the record onto tape.
Oh, that's cool.
And then but the cool thing about Dad's is like it had its own input level controller, so you could just crank it, so all of my tapes sounded 10 times louder than any of my friends' tapes, and they're just like, what the fuck?
Awesome.
And but yeah, so, and as far as being a comedian, like I grew up in Kansas. Like that wasn't,
It wasn't an option.
It wasn't like what was day one of that?
Right.
So, and it wasn't until I was 19. I mean, we watched stand-up comedy all the time. Like me and my dad would stay up late and watch A&E's Evening at the Improv. And, that was during the comedy boom. And the boom that would eventually destroy comedy for several years.
Right.
When just every show had a stand-up show, and it just all of a sudden like some fucking B-level feature act was getting 7 minutes.
Yep. And we're kind of in that interesting space again, I feel like, in a different way.
It is, but I feel like now at least it's on late at night, like comedy.tv or whatever that other shit is.
Yeah.
It's on late at, like, this shit was prime time.
Oh, yeah. So
Yeah.
it was really like
so it was like, yeah, and
so
people are just
saturated.
like, I've seen this joke 87 times. And then eventually a buddy of mine who was just that dude that he would see a movie and want to be that movie.
And repeat it over and over again?
No, like he saw swingers, and a week later was wearing zoot suits, and all of a sudden
Oh
knew
my
how to
God.
ballroom dance,
So
and like
becoming the actual characters.
yeah, and so he saw a stand-up comedy thing, and he was like, I mean, it was 1998, so we still had phone books. So we
Yep.
opened up the phone book. There was one comedy club in Kansas City, and he called him up, and he goes, "I want to be a stand-up comedian. How do I do it?" And the girl kind of chuckled and was like, "We have an open mic night. You can come down and sign up." And so
That's awesome.
So he called me and told me he was doing it, and I showed up, and just by happenstance, they sat me front row center. And I just watched, and I watched the whole thing, and I'm like, I'm funnier than half of these people. Like I'm not funnier than anyone in here, but I'm funnier than half. Like if I showed up, it wouldn't be embarrassing.
Right.
And so a month later, I got the balls to do it, and it was the best thing I'd ever done in my entire life. So, and then I just kept doing it.
Did your friend keep doing it?
No, he did it for about. My friend did it for about 8 months, but in that time frame, moved to LA for 3 weeks,
Whoa.
moved back. Like,
Oh my
just-
gosh.
he did the whole.
He went balls to the walls with it.
Balls to the wall, and but he's always been that guy. Like he went to Ed DeBevick's in Chicago on vacation and asked to audition, killed, like danced on the bar and like did all this shit. Just did it.
Yeah.
And then they're like, "You're hired." He was like, "I don't fucking live here," and walked out the door.
Fuck.
Yeah.
So he kind of had the balls to kind of do
Had
whatever.
the balls and also kind of had the chutzpah or the fucking talent to do it.
Yeah.
Like he could pull it off. Like he just had that air about him, and still does. Like he can.
What was his name? What's his name?
His name's John Adams, and continued to live just the weirdest life on the face of the planet. Quit here, became a U.S. Marshal for a long time. Worked in the federal prison. You know why he became a U.S. Marshal?
Why?
Because he saw the movie U.S. Marshals.
So he just took a new
Not even
persona
kidding,
on
yeah.
every couple of years.
So then
That's so
I don't hear
interesting.
from. So then he gets married, has kids, like living a regular life, and then comes out of the blue and he's like, "I'm going to be on the show 60 Days In on A&E. I've already filmed it. Here's the sizzle." And I'm like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And turn it on, and there he is. He spent 2 months in this jail, and then cut to we went to our 20-year high school reunion together. And because he was like, "You've been on TV, I've been on TV. We were best friends in high school. Let's just walk in together." I'm like, "Sounds great." And we walked in, and we had a great time. And then 20 minutes into the high school reunion, he comes up to me furious. And he's like, "All anybody wants to talk about is the show." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's what you've done."
Yeah.
I go, "Jobs, kids, families, everyone here has that. It cancels it out. They don't want to hear about that shit. They want to
Yep.
hear about the cool shit that you've done."
Yeah.
Like, do you think anyone's asking me about anything other than comedy?
Exactly.
No, it's all. I've had the same conversation 37 times.
Mm-hmm.
Do it.
Especially in your hometown.
Yeah.
Because that happens whenever you leave your hometown from a city, you know, because I grew up in a similar situation. When you come back, you're the most interesting.
For sure. And that's a lot of fun.
It is great.
Especially for a kid that wasn't the coolest kid in high school.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't the dorkiest, but I wasn't the coolest. And then you walk in and you're like, I'm not saying I won, but
You kind
I kinda
of
won.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it feels good. It just makes you feel like you've accomplished something when you obviously know you have, but the career takes so long that it's nice to just feel praised for a second.
for sure. Because there was definitely a moment where people were like, "Oh, you're still doing the comedy thing?"
Yeah, and I hate that
Yeah.
phrase.
You're like, okay.
You know, and like I know I've only been doing stand up just shy of 10 years, but I started in the sketch and improv world almost 15 ago.
Yeah.
And so it took me years to even just get the balls to do the stand up portion of it. And I already had some balls because I was doing the improv stuff.
That's all anyone talks about is Natasha's balls.
My balls.
When you're not
all
around,
of my
you're
balls.
like, you can see them. Like, tuck them in or something.
But yeah, I mean, so I respect the fact that like we have to take a moment to sometimes feel a little bit more accomplished than we realize we are.
And it also sucks dating, especially in this town, because you're like, people will be like, or girls will be like, "Oh, what do you do?" And you're like, "I'm a comedian." And there's like that, "Oh," and you're like, "Oh, no, 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 I make money at it.
Yeah,
I'm
like
successful.
I'm a good one.
You will never have to come to one of my bringer shows. Like, you don't
Yeah.
have to show up to a show at all if you don't
Yeah.
want to." Like, and it's funny. Like, I tell very few people that I'm a comedian. Like in Ubers,
Oh yeah, I don't do that either.
I do. You have to, if you're a comedian, you have to, or an entertainer of any sort, you have to have like an alias job, I call it.
Yeah.
Just like a job that sounds super boring that you're not going to. I tell Uber drivers that I inspect malls for a company that owns malls.
Oh, that's fucking brilliant.
And there's very few follow-ups. Like the guy today had the most follow-ups. He was like, "So what do you look for?" And I'm like, "Just compliance issues and just making sure everything's up to code." I was like, "If everything's up to code, they don't even know I'm there." I was like, otherwise it just shows up in my report. And then he had more follow-ups. I'm like, "Yeah, fuck. It's all right. Now it's more of an improv
Yep.
training class at this
Just
point."
keeping your tools sharp. You're
Yeah.
just keeping your tools sharp.
So, and then it's fun because I'm like, "Oh, my boss Gary's kind of a dick." Just making up Gary's.
Oh my gosh. I love those kinds of conversations. What I used to say to people on flights was juice stand owner, because I do
Okay.
go to the Caribbean a lot. So I would just be like, yeah, I have a juice stand in the Caribbean.
Oh, nice.
And they'd actually be pretty interested in that. But there's not many questions you can ask about that.
Yeah. So so what kind of juice?
I'm like, just, whatever's local and fresh for that season, like guava.
Yeah, a lot of guavas.
You just throw guava around and people are like, all right, she's legit.
Yeah.
It's like the only exotic fruit that I know.
And that's when you should start just messing with them. And sometimes like a rutabaga. You ever had rutabaga juice? And they're like, "No, but I'm gonna try it."
Breadfruit. You know what breadfruit is? Sugar cane, just anything that we can find.
Anything
basically.
you can juice, really.
Yeah. But I love those fake personas. I haven't done that in a while. Sometimes when I just want to shut down the conversation, I'll be like, I work in entertainment. And I don't continue from there, especially in Vegas, because then they'll just assume I'm a stripper, and then they don't want to ask. They don't want to know. They don't want to ask.
When me and my buddies went on vacation, because we're all in the entertainment industry, it was kind of like first night. We talked about what we'd been up to, and we were like, "Okay, that's it for work talk for the rest of the weekend." And so people would come up to us and be like, "Well, what do you guys do?" And we'd just be like, "Yeah, we're in entertainment." And
Yeah.
they were like, "Oh, what kind?" And like, "All of it."
Yeah, between all of us, everything.
Everything.
Yep.
Just both sides. A lot of craft services.
We just, mainly just eating snacks,
Yeah.
Eating snacks, turning knobs. That's what we do.
I think it wasn't until the last day that we were drunk enough to we were like, "Fuck it, we're comedians. We're super funny."
Yeah, you do wait till the last minute, and then
Yeah.
that's when because it's more fun to be underestimated. This is something that I've grown into more over time.
Yeah.
I'd rather somebody be like, wow, that random chick with the juice stand is fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
And then like 3 days later be like, well, that's actually what I do. So
Rather than that comic isn't funny.
yeah.
It's like, well, man, I'm just hanging out.
Yeah.
I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah, I know.
Because I've also been around the comedian that has to be the comedian all the time. And you're like, I'm starting to hate myself now.
Yeah, I've been around that too. And I get that like some people are naturally like very charismatic, but like have ups and downs. There's peaks and valleys, my friends.
Also, if you're the comic that has to be funny all the time, odds are you and I aren't going to hang out very much.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like,
and
oh,
you
this
just
is fun.
need to just be a human first.
For sure. Yeah.
Human first, job second.
We all know we're funny. That's
Right.
how we met.
Yep, exactly.
That currency doesn't spend well here.
So when you were starting, I mean, were you planning to go to school for anything, or were you already in college, or were you just on a breather time?
I was pretty disillusioned at the time. Well, what I wasn't aware of, so when I was 17, the summer before my junior and senior year, I got hit in the head with a golf ball and had to have brain surgery.
Whoa.
Yeah, and went through a pretty heavy depression afterwards that was caused by the injury. But
Yeah.
The doctors didn't tell me that. I didn't know that till literally years later, happened to be having a conversation after a show with a neurosurgeon. And I was telling him, I'm like, "Oh, this happened." And he was like, "Did you go through a really heavy depression after that?" I was like, "Well, yeah, but I thought it was just because I was 18 and listening to too much Skid Row." And he was like, "No, that's a
Side effect.
Side effect." And I was like, "Oh, well, that makes sense." And so, and then that's what kind of got me into stand-up. It was just got that release.
That moment, yeah.
And yeah, What was it? I forgot what the question was.
Oh, just where you were at as far as college, or what was your plan?
So I'm at KU. I'm super sad. Like waking up every day, like, oh, fuck, I woke up. Like that kind of shit.
Yeah.
And it got pretty dark. But then I smoked weed for the first time, and that kind of helped. Just the perspective change kind of helped a little bit. And then the comedy thing was like, the first time I did it, I was like, oh, this is something.
Yeah.
Because all my uncles were in music and in bands, and they my uncle lived out here for a long time and always got close to record deals and never really got one. And so they were kind of this cautionary tale that my mom would have.
Of entertainment period?
Yeah, just like, you can chase your dreams, but maybe go to school first. But
have a plan B
it just
kind of thing?
wasn't happening.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't want to be there. And so I came back and went to JUCO and really just buried myself into stand-up comedy and also bars. And because I was working as a barback on the weekends, and at 19 at one of the hottest bars in the country, or in the city. And so it was just like this great life where I'm walking home at like 4 a.m, half drunk.
With cash.
With so much cash. Because this was pre 9/11. Like, bartenders were walking home with like $700 every night.
Oh, yeah. I had my first bar job at 19 in Minneapolis, and I was just a coat check girl.
Yeah.
But it was the first time I'd ever made cash doing anything. And I had only farmed, essentially, and worked in bakeries before that.
And now you're walking out with this fucking pimp wad.
Yeah. I would take a Crown Royal bag, and it would just be full of ones. And I was like, this is awesome.
The first time I got a tip, like, I didn't even know what it was. They're like, here's your tip out envelope. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, 80, 90, 100. Like, in 1998, for a 19-year-old kid, that was like $1,000.
Oh, it was like $2,000.
You're just like, we're going to the mall and buying everything.
Yep, you're rich.
And and then it was like, I would just have all this, you're 19 and stupid, so you would just take all your money with you when you went out.
Yep.
And so, like, you'd go to pay for whatever, sodas at teen night, and you just pull out this fucking pimp wad, and girls are like, what is going on with you? And you're like, this is life now.
Yep.
So yeah, and it was just, and then on Mondays, going straight to Stanford's and doing comedy, and then going, driving to Omaha and doing.
Was that the first club? Was that the club in Kansas City?
Club, yeah. And the first one, the Westport Club, was the greatest club, one of the greatest clubs of all time. It was upstairs. It was low ceilinged, not very deep, but super wingy.
That great cavey feeling.
Oh, and it was just, I think you could still smoke at the time, and it was just this weird, like, it was pure rock and roll. Like, I remember doing Tommy Chong shows there, and like the energy was fucking electric.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
And you still find it at some clubs, and as great as the mall funny bones are, I mean, they give us a place to tell jokes, and it allows a lot of us to work 40 weeks a year. They're not the they're not the premium audiences, but those dirty old clubs that are like downtown, like,
where you can smell the age and touch
for
it on
sure,
the walls.
like Comedy Works, or like, not that Comedy Works is dirty, but just has that low, we're downtown, we're out, we're doing things. Like, there's just that electricity to it that you don't have when you're 2 doors down from a GNC.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's still, and this was long before any of the mall funny bones.
Well, it's just grit. It's just a grit that is around in some of these. Like, that's what was intriguing about New York the first time I ever played there. I was in some, like, I don't even remember what club, but it was in the basement. And, I got bumped off my show because Seinfeld showed up, and 5 other people got bumped off the show too. And we were all just sitting there, and we were like, I can't believe we're here.
Yeah, this
watching
is happening.
Seinfeld. What?
And we're part of it. We can go say hi to him afterwards.
It's fucking cool. Yeah. And, you could try to say hi. I mean, I definitely did not try to say hi because I was about to shit myself. But I was like, but it was such a cool experience. And I was like, this is what we signed up to do this for.
Yeah, and those are the great moments of, like, I remember being at a club. My agent during the last Comic Stadium run took me to Dangerfields to see the Dangerfield documentary, and it was just this enclosed, private event, and Seinfeld showed up, and of course we're all like, and Moby was there, and no one gave a shit.
Oh my God.
And like Moby like came over to our table and was like, "Hey, I'm Moby," and we're like, "Yeah, cool, man, have a seat."
Here we are now going to the. That's the only Moby song I know.
Well, yeah, the only Moby song I really remember is that "Sally Up" song.
Yeah.
And it's because it's like the bane of every CrossFitter's existence because they do like horrifying workouts to that song. Yeah. And it's just like, so now anytime I hear it, like my stomach growls a little bit. But Seinfeld was at this thing, and I remember I was just walking behind him, and I touched his shoulder to see if he'd turn around to say so I could say hello, and he didn't. And I was like, close enough.
Yep.
Like I touched him. I'm there. Done and done.
Yeah. And it's so cool to be exposed to that because you're like, eventually, if I can touch, if it's tangible, then I could eventually be that. It gives you hope in some weird way.
Well, and comedy's allowed me to live a life that I dreamed of as a kid. Like 24, 25, I followed the Black Crowes around the country and watched watched their shows and dreamed of one day going to a show and then getting on the bus with them and going to the next thing. And through comedy, I met Chris Robinson, and that happened several times.
Yeah.
And you're just like, I remember being on the road with the Crows, and I'd go to the back of the front of the house with on all the cheap seats.
Yep.
And I would sit there and I'd be like, this is what it used to be like. And then I would look down at my backstage pass and go, and now this is where we are now. And I'd walk to the back and hang out backstage and just like made sure I recognized the moment.
And appreciated it.
And it appreciated it.
Yeah.
And it was just, and to this day, I still kind of get goosebumps when I think about those days.
Yeah, I mean, and the fact that you said, now you're doing these other cool things, and you do have to take the moments to appreciate those like giant steps in life.
Which is something I learned from hanging out with like super famous people that still get blown away by big moments.
The shit they're doing.
Yeah, like, not to name drop, but hanging out with Kid Rock, he still gets starstruck with people and still is like, he'll still look at me and be like, can you believe this is fucking happening?
Yeah.
Can you believe this life that we lead? And I'm just like, it's cool that even a guy that is as successful as you, because I've also hung out with people that were too cool for school.
Yeah.
And that's a much more miserable experience.
It is,
Where
yeah.
It's like, yeah, that happened.
Well, it's more that caged animal feeling that I've noticed. Like, some people, some A-listers that I've been around and stuff where they can't go out into they have to stay in this little circle around all their PR people. And you're like, that would be very stuck feeling.
For sure.
And there's part of that, that in a superstar that I respect where they just feel like they're a person of the people. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it, but.
Well, you can also tell a celebrity that has nothing but yes men around them because the way they talk is so grandiose and rarefied air where they're just like, you can do whatever you want to. You just have to set your mind to it and you just go out there and you do it. And you're like, no, man, you have $1 billion. That's why you get to do this shit, Will Smith.
Yep.
It's not because you don't think people in Flint, Michigan aren't setting their minds to fucking trying to get the fuck out, but sometimes life is a dick.
Yep.
And you've won 1,000 lotteries, and you should respect that fact.
Yeah. And sometimes money is the only reason people can't do anything.
Yeah.
And I get that.
And I also understand that some people have dreams and never do the right steps to achieve them. They're like, I'm just going to make it. And you're like, well, how are you going to do that? And they're like, I'll be fine. Someone will discover me.
Yeah.
That's never happened ever.
No. And that's why you have to make your own shit, whatever it is. And like I said, appreciate those moments along the way because otherwise, it's easy to lose sight of that. Even if I go out with a lot of successful people sometimes, just you develop friendships after being in LA for a long time. And it's funny how many people I consider to be the top of their game that are just like, I don't even know what I'm going to do next.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's a really interesting way to feel when I think you're crushing it.
Well, it's because those people are always looking upward.
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, you're doing so well. And I'm like, no, not yet.
Yeah.
I'm still doing half-filled clubs in a lot of places. And now, granted, I feel very happy at the fact that I'm given that opportunity, but also
Yeah.
it's like, no, man, we need to put asses in these seats. These rooms need to be full,
Yeah.
and we're not there yet. So we need to continue to strive forward.
Exactly.
And that's what, and I also like hanging out with, like my friend circle has changed, and I think that happens a lot throughout life. Like you tend to, for lack of a better term, molt friends. Like you just
You
and-
outgrow people.
and
sometimes.
some people, like, especially when you have success and certain friends don't, some friends can be very excited for you. No matter what you do and no matter what they don't do, they're just like, fucking yeah, man, you're doing your dreams. And then you have your friends that are just like, well, why did you get to do that?
Yeah.
Why are you successful and I'm not?
Like
And-
the victim mentality.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's just like, and one of my best friends in the world, we put in so many miles together, and just the more successful I got, the more animosity there was between us. And
Yeah.
it was never, and he just stopped talking to me.
Which sucks.
And you're
that
just,
has to be that way, but sometimes it happens.
yeah, and like I called him several times, and eventually was like, hey man, if you want to still be friends, you should probably call me back. And there was no response, and it's like, all right, well,
You gotta let it go.
gotta let it go.
Mm-hmm.
I can't be mad. I can't let your jealousy affect me.
Yeah.
And now I hang out, and you have to surround yourself with people that are positive and supportive, no matter what's going on in their life.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like there are it's easy to be supportive when you're doing well,
You're right.
but it's when you're doing poorly, that's when it's like, you really should be still be supportive.
Yeah.
It can't be this like, well, why you not me mentality.
Exactly. And I feel like it took some time in LA, especially to find those people. But after a while, when you do, you're like, oh, thank God, I got my people here.
Yeah. So what someone told me, and I found to be very true, is like, as douchebaggy as people can be in Los Angeles, they can be that much cooler as well.
Exactly.
You got to find those people.
Yeah.
And I've definitely, and it took a long time, but I've definitely found a group of friends that no matter, and granted, they're all very successful, but even when they're not, or they're in a lull, they're still very much like, well, fuck yeah, man. Do you.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's awesome. That's a good place to be in. So when did you feel like in stand-up, how far along were you when you did your first album, or when did you feel like you made a first big milestone?
Well, Last Comic Standing was like the first thing I did.
Yeah.
And that was humongous. And it was kind of,
I remember your season.
yeah, it was and I was very lucky to be on that season, in the fact that, a lot of seasons the cast didn't get along, and there was a lot of animosity. We were very supportive.
Which is
Like,
good.
everyone was friendly. From the beginning, Stella and Roz got into it like the first day, but I think they saw that coming, so that's probably a good reason, especially why Stella was cast.
Yeah.
So
And how far were you in at that point? You would have been.
that was the house. But that was top 12
Yeah.
when they got into it, and then I got third.
Yep.
And that, Gabe got kicked off, and that was kind of a fucked up situation because none of us really cared that he had a phone, because we all knew. He was like, I have a phone, my girlfriend's had surgery, I'm keeping tabs on her. And
Yeah. Oh, that's right. I forgot about
and
that.
we'd cover for him. They'd be like, where's
Yep.
Gabe? And we're like, I just saw him. And then they found him with it. And the only thing that bummed me out about that situation is they interviewed all of us, and they only showed the 2 interviews where they were like, well, those are the rules. And that wasn't really the sentiment for most of us.
Right.
So that was that was a big thing. Like, that was literally, I went from 1 week being a feature act to literally getting calls from my agents offering me 10 times what I normally get paid. And you're just like the whole
What
time.
a blessing.
Yeah, it's like this weird, and that is the only time that's ever happened, by the way. And then, but that was the first big thing where you're like, oh, this is definitely a turning point.
Yeah.
A huge one at that.
Yeah.
So, because I was like the strong feature that would headline the off nights.
Yeah.
and they'd be like, "Yeah, you should be headlining, but you have no credits."
And
whatsoever.
how far in as a stand-up were you at that point?
7 years, 6 or 7 years.
6 or 7 years. Okay.
And I'd probably been a professional, like no job stand-up comic for 2 years at that point. And so yeah, but you know, that was a lot of comics think, oh, I have strong 45, I should be headlining. But that's not how it goes. Like you still, people have to know who the fuck you are.
Exactly. And people don't realize how hard it is to sell tickets, even for big names.
Yeah.
And that's why whenever, you know, some people will ask me how I get to headline a lot. And I'm like, it's because I call and email probably 20 venues in a city that aren't the major club, because I know exactly who's playing there that weekend, and I'm not going to compete with that.
Yeah.
And I find one night that's an off night, or a night or a place just outside of the city that some locals would definitely fill it up.
For sure.
And I do my own door deal, and that's what I do.
Yeah.
Because then I know I have a chance of selling it out, maybe.
And making some decent
money.
money.
And making some decent money, and I pick a size of room that I know I could fill. I pick towns that I know I have a little bit of a following in.
But you're smart and you have business acumen.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's different than a lot of the people, even at, you know, this space, that'll think that they can handle an entire weekend. It's, you know, it's just, that's a lot. I mean, when you do like Irvine, for example, what is that, like almost 600 people?
Yeah, there's no way I'm filling that.
Well, and it's hard for anybody to.
Yeah.
So for anybody to email a club and be like, I can fill your 600 person room 5 shows over a weekend, they're going to be like, fuck you.
Yeah, there's no way.
Yeah.
Because we would have heard of you.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so that's the thing, like young comics are so artistic and they're just so, it's about the thing. And I was that person. I definitely, and you're speaking, like I've lived that life, and it's just like the greatest advice Tracy Morgan ever gave me was, it's called show business. It's a business. And these clubs have to make money, and it's not for the love of the game. You know, good comedy doesn't pay rent.
Yep.
Money does.
Yep.
And so it's like these young comics have to realize that these clubs are trying to survive.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like the rest of us.
Exactly.
And they have to be, and you know, and it probably took me 15 years to figure that out. And what it took was not being booked anymore. Like all of a sudden after Last Comic Standing, I hadn't really done anything and no one was showing up. And like one year they were just like, yeah, we'll do fill-ins, but we're not going to book you at all.
Yeah.
And that was the worst phone call I ever got.
Which is crazy, because you go from this highlight moment where you're like, oh man, I'm going to continue making this amount, but it doesn't.
Nothing's guaranteed.
Nothing's guaranteed over and over.
And everything's cyclical.
And everything has to you have to be so relevant. That's why people get so stressed in this business, because you have to just feel like you have to stay so relevant. And you do, in order to maintain your lifestyle financially, even the way that you had at one point, you have to stay as relevant as you once were.
For sure. And also, like, you also have to constantly coming up with new material, so that when people come see you in a year, you're not doing the same 45 minutes.
Right, exactly.
They definitely want to come hear different jokes, and it took me a while to figure that out. And now it's like you realize that, at least for me, my cycle is record an album, ditch all that material.
Yep.
Write the new album, put out that album, repeat. Like that's until I get a TV thing or whatever. My path to success is just continually making material and giving my fans a new special or a new something to feed
to
on.
look forward to. Exactly. And now there's 3. So where are you at right now in the process? Are you about to start your new?
I mean, I have about 35 minutes written of the new hour.
Of the new? Oh, nice.
Yeah, and so hopefully, like I'm doing 55 minutes most nights, and like the last 5 is me doing like old fan favorites.
But yeah, when we just did Irvine, I saw you close out in that really fun way where you do a Q&A and you allow the fans to like coax you down a new storytelling path.
For sure.
That you reference back something old, but it's a cool way to do it. It's not like...
I do it a lot, because people are gonna. It helps me know what jokes people want to hear.
Yeah.
Because it's always, almost every Q&A is a guy going, "What do you think about talk?" Like they ask you a question that leads you into a bit, basically, and I'll be like, "Oh, you want me to do the Taco Bell bit? I'll do it at the end," and then, but also it allows. The reason I started doing the Q&A was because I was trying to stop answering two questions: what happened to your hair, and what happened to the bell bottoms. Like it was just, it was just happening in every show. So I was like, let's just get this out in the open. And so, and every show you've been there, someone asked, what happened to the hair?
Yep.
And it's a good story. And, but that way I don't have to tell that story 17 times while people are buying t-shirts.
Yeah. Exactly.
So.
Yeah. And it's a crafty way. And I feel like it also makes them feel like they're your buddy.
Yeah.
Too, which is,
it opens it up to be like more of a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is fun.
So,
okay, well, what do you have coming up? This will come out tomorrow. So what do you want to plug as far as upcoming
this weekend,
shows?
I'll be at the Punchline in Sacramento. Sacramentos. And then next week, I will be in somewhere in New Brunswick, New Jersey, at Vinnie Brand's Comedy Stress Factory.
Oh, okay. I heard the Stress Factory is fun. I've never played it.
I've only played it once for New Year's, and New Year's was interesting and not fun just because they were drunk and I had to deal with a very... this chick was such a pain in the crowd's ass that the family she came with was like, you'll never come to another one of our family functions again.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
It was that bad?
It was that bad.
What, just heckling,
she was just saying shit, and I'm like, listen, sweetheart, because when people heckle, I try my best not to rip on them. Mm-hmm. I'm just like, hey, man, there's a lot of people here, and they didn't pay to hear you talk your shit.
Yeah.
And so I just explained to them what the situation is. Mm-hmm. And normally that works. And this chick wasn't having it. She was just like, well, blah, blah, blah. And just kept, and like her friends are telling her to shut up. And like even her boyfriend's like, you need to calm down. She's like, no. And she goes, I paid $100 to get in here. And the audience, almost in unison, was like, we all paid $100 to get in here.
Exactly.
It wasn't just a fucking bitch tax.
Yeah.
And and so just dealt with that. And then New Year's Eve was the first night. And then I had to finish out the weekend, which is the second most dead weekend of the year.
Well, and everybody probably goes into the city for that too.
Well, no, everyone's just tired. They've done the whole holidays. They did New Year's, and now they're done. No one's going out. And I just I remember being on stage in front of 12 people, not happy. It's not going well. And this woman starts talking on her phone in the front row.
Fuck.
And I lost my shit. And I'm like, are you fucking out of your mind? I go, what makes you think this is okay? I'm like, I'm up here doing a live performance, and you're on the phone, and her husband, and she's not getting off, by the way, and her husband's just like, just lay off her. I'm like, no, fuck you. And I went off on him, and then I felt myself start to cry because I was just so, like, I had anger cries.
Yeah.
And I was just like, and I just sat down, and the audience was like, oh, we kind of fucked up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I go, do you think this is easy? I go, do you think this was the dream to perform in front of 12 fucking people 3,000 miles away from my apartment?
Right.
I'm like, no, man, this is a shit gig for me, and you're paying me no respect, so you're making it 1,000 times worse. And like, while I'm saying this, the wife just kind of puts her phone down, and I was like, do you see where I'm coming from now? And she was like, yeah. I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
But it was definitely
sometimes you gotta let that reality sink in so hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's fuck. I hope this Jersey trip is not like that for you.
I'm hoping it'll be a little bit better.
And then everything's just on your website coming up after that?
Yeah, there will be tomorrow. I have to post my new dates. But ChrisPorterComedy.com. And then I am Chris Porter is the social media
on
stuff.
social.
Yeah.
On Twitter as well?
Twitter and Instagram.
I know. I can't tell if people still use Twitter or not. I still do.
I don't. I do it every once in a while, but it's just like, I feel like every time I go to Twitter, I just want to tweet, hey, you guys know Instagram's a thing, right?
That should be all your Twitter feed is. Just please refer to Instagram.
Yeah, you guys are old. Do you also still have pagers?
I only tweet when my podcast comes out. That's it. But I used to put out tweets about my grandma a lot, and that was pretty fun. And then I just kind of stopped.
The last tweet, or one of the last tweets I did was, a girl got mad at me for unfollowing her on Instagram, and then I resolved that matter, and then she found out I unfollowed her on Twitter, and so I get this text from her that says, "You unfollowed me on Twitter too, you overdramatic ass." So so I followed her, and then immediately tweeted, "There's no hell hath no wrath like a woman that found out you unfollowed her on Instagram," and I was like, "There you go, I'm tweeting again."
Well, it's and I just heard about a lot of people telling me, "Oh, so and so unfollowed me, so and so unfollowed me." How do you know? Like, I don't look at that shit.
Oh yeah, I think. Well, I told her I unfollowed her on Instagram.
I was like, how do people have that much time where they can pay attention to who's following and unfollowing them?
She was like, because we had dated and then we kind of stopped seeing each other, and she was like, I muted your stories, and I was like, yeah, I fucking unfollowed you. And she was
one up on you, biatch.
And she was like, she got super upset, and I'm like, it was like a playful upset, but definitely dramatic.
Right.
And I'm like, I go, to me, I'm a guy like that. It's just less buttons to unfollow you. I don't have to click a thing and then hit mute. I just hit unfollow.
Yep.
And to me, it's the same. And like to her, it wasn't.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny. I have never even noticed, but I'm like, God bless people that pay attention.
Yeah.
It's just go live your life.
I know a buddy of mine a fellow comic who we all know went up to him and was like, "Hey man, why'd you unfollow me on Twitter?" And he was like, "Yeah, I got," because you can get the software that like tells you when people unfollow you.
Sure, yeah, you can.
And he was like, "Yeah, I just noticed you unfollowed me on Twitter." He was like, "Yeah, man, I guess I just wasn't into it."
Yep.
Sorry, bro.
Yep, and that's, there's plenty of people that I've unfollowed too just because I'm like, well, you're annoying.
Yeah, or it's like, I get it, you're a vegan.
Yeah,
like,
stop yelling at us. Let me enjoy my bacon without a comment.
I get it. It's murder, but it's delicious murder.
Exactly. A couple of years ago, my fiance and I we used to take a lot of pictures for magazines and like weird food shit. And
yeah.
We had done this bacon headdress.
Okay.
We built it out of thick cut bacon and took pictures. It looked really cool. And I just put it out on the internet for fun. I just tweeted about it. And I was like, meathead. Yeah. And I got all this backlash from vegans.
But it's also
they were like, you're just wasting meat on your head. And I was like, so what?
Yeah, it's not like I went and killed a pig just for this. Like this bacon
was already done.
It was done.
It was already done, and I'm just playing around with bacon.
But also, it's like, and that's one of the big problems I have with social media is like everyone just feels like you need to hear their opinion.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't.
Well, that's why I took everything off YouTube for the most part, because the YouTube audience is the worst in my opinion. And
yeah,
I was like,
dungeon dwellers that never leave the house.
I'm like, I have any current videos are up on my own website, and they will just live there.
Yeah.
Because people aren't going to go to my website to comment or message me stuff. Yeah. YouTube is just the worst place.
Fucking go die, you're the worst.
Everything else, and people are like, oh, you should really have a YouTube channel. Should I? I don't think my life would be better with YouTube channel.
I feel really good about myself now, and I like to keep it that way.
Yeah, I don't want to read people's fucking comments about me being a chick and I'm not funny. Anyway, and you can find me at MPH Comedy on all the things. Follow the podcast at Future Role Model or at Role Model Pod on Twitter if you do use Twitter. Any final closing remarks?
Nope.
Be nice.
Okay. Be nice. Don't be a dick. And if your friend's a dick, find new friends.
Exactly. All right, peace.